Hey guys, tonight we're staying up way past bedtime. And I promise, this isn't your usual late-night ramble about snack choices or TikTok trends. Right now, you feel the floorboards breathe beneath your feet, and every shadow in the corner of your room seems to lean a little closer than it should. You'll wish you never looked out that window, because the world outside isn't quite right tonight, and it's waiting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and comment your current local time and one creepy thing in your room right now. I'm curious who's really awake with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts on a crisp November evening, when the wind carries that faint metallic tang you usually only smell near construction sites or railroads. You're supposed to be celebrating your birthday. Maybe you had a small cake earlier in the day, candles flickering, but something in the back of your mind tells you not to get too excited. It's midweek, so your official party is postponed until the weekend. Still, you had a few gifts, nothing extravagant. Maybe a couple of new games that now feel insignificant in the face of the subtle unease creeping through the house. Experts still argue whether humans are hardwired to detect danger subconsciously, but you're definitely sensing something tonight. Then, the knock comes. Not the polite, friendly knock of a neighbor returning a borrowed tool, but heavy, deliberate, measured. You pause mid-scroll on your device, the glow of the screen casting long, uneven shadows across the walls. A man in a tailored jacket waits outside, clipboard in hand, flanked by two silent figures whose presence screams authority or menace. Your parents are already speaking with them before you fully reach the bottom step. Their voices carry a tension you can almost taste, like copper on your tongue, and your stomach twists in anticipation. Consent forms, the clipboard man says smoothly. We need them signed. There's no badge, no official insignia, just this unsettling certainty that they belong somewhere you're not invited to understand. Outside, the street seems impossibly still, the wind stilled as if the world is holding its breath. Internet and phone signals vanish one by one, and the lights in your room feel sharper, unnatural. Something in the way the men move, calculated, precise, triggers a strange familiarity, like a glitch in memory, the same way some urban legends suggest we can sense unseen predators. You shrug, try not to stare too long, but it's impossible. Every fiber in your body is awake, waiting. They move through the house systematically, collecting what they deem hazardous. Your gaming console, small gadgets, your curiosity itself. You're told nothing will happen if you cooperate, but the air is heavy with implication. Your parents are tense, their voices clipped, nodding to instructions you barely understand. Then, the clipboard man explains the rule that will shape the next 3 days. No sleep. Not for you, not for your family. Your mind refuses to process it fully. Sleep is the most basic human need. Experts still argue whether complete deprivation can permanently alter cognition, but right now, it's a non-negotiable law enforced by strangers. You glance at the small vial of chemical booster in their hands and at the fiber bars, warm and unbranded, a strange promise of survival or something darker. By the time they leave, the house feels hollow, alien. The familiar smell of your kitchen is replaced by something antiseptic, sharp, and metallic. You should be able to relax, maybe play your games, but the air hums with tension, each sound magnified. A floorboard creak, a whisper of wind, the faint drip of water in the sink. Outside, the street is still too quiet, like it's holding secrets you're not ready to witness. You sit down with your controller, trying to anchor yourself to the ordinary, but every shadow feels alive, and every reflection in your screen winks at you like it knows something you don't. Tonight, you're wide awake, whether you like it or not, and you realize that this birthday is going to be nothing like any before it. The first hours pass in a haze of artificial light and faint hums from electronics. You've barricaded yourself in your room, every curtain drawn, your PlayStation screen glowing like a small beacon in the dark. At first, it feels like a gift. No homework, no school, unlimited time to play. But then you notice how the hum of the console seems to pulse with a rhythm that isn't quite right. Your pulse matches it almost involuntarily, a shared beat with the room, a whisper from some unseen source that you're not alone. Scientists have noted that prolonged wakefulness can create micro-hallucinations, tiny cracks in perception, but it's one thing to read about it online and another to feel it creeping along your spine. Your parents try to anchor the night. Your dad, always the pragmatic type, mixes a weak cup of coffee with a jittery hand, while your mom hums a tune that she normally wouldn't dare in front of you at this hour. Experts still argue whether rhythmic sounds can stave off sleep deprivation hallucinations, but you try to cling to that. Fiber bars taste like something between cardboard and a spice your brain refuses to identify, but they dull the fatigue just enough to keep you alert. Every time you swallow one, the powder sticks to the back of your throat, a tiny reminder that you are participating in something unnatural. By dawn, the world outside has shifted. The streetlights flicker, though it's barely dark anymore, and there are shadows moving in ways they shouldn't. Your neighbor, Mr. Crawford, a man you'd only seen shuffle slowly to his mailbox, stumbles out onto the pavement, crawling on all fours, muttering nonsense that cuts between laughter and panic. Your stomach twists. Urban legends claim sleep deprivation can trigger violent outbursts and erratic behavior, but seeing it firsthand is another kind of terror. Your mind races. Is this chemical? Something psychological? Or has the world simply cracked open, exposing its hidden, chaotic layer? You hear a whisper, a soft hiss from the hallway outside your room. Something calls your name, but it's not quite human, more like a mimicry of sound your mind wants to recognize as familiar. You grip your controller tighter. The lights in the hallway pulse, and for a second, the shadows seem to step closer, reaching their edges into the room. Experts still debate whether sensory deprivation and sleep loss hallucinations are entirely self-generated or influenced by faint environmental cues, and right now, you'd believe either. Your parents attempt breakfast, though it's a theater of survival rather than normalcy. You watch them from the doorway, trying to imitate a sense of calm. Your father's hands shake as he pours juice, and your mother moves with jerky, robotic motions, muttering about schedules, booster shots, timing. You notice her eyes, dark at the edges, unblinking at times, like someone trapped in a waking nightmare. You know from old internet forums that sleep-deprived brains can distort faces, elongate features, or create impossible pupils. Part of you wonders if she's still herself or a projection of your growing paranoia. Then the first external incident shatters the fragile calm. A series of gunshots echoes from down the street. Not the polite pop of fireworks or a car backfiring, but deliberate, sharp, chaotic bursts. You press your face to the window, noticing Mr. Crawford again, now flailing at a street sign, laughter turning to guttural screams. The backyard glows with unnatural reflections from something burning a few houses down. Your heart thuds against ribs that feel too thin, too exposed, as you witness familiar neighbors transform into creatures that obey neither logic nor gravity. Hands twist from their mouths, some blackened, some blue, like shadows made flesh. They beckon each other, or perhaps you, in a dance that mocks every rational part of your mind. The chemical boosters make your fingers tingle, a subtle electric reminder that your body is being coerced into vigilance. You take another, more out of fear than rational thought, and the world sharpens, edges cutting your vision like shards of broken glass. You pace the room, unable to stay seated, and the walls seem to pulse with the distant cries of the street. Voices merge with the static of your gaming system, whispers you can't decipher. Stay awake, they urge. Keep moving. You feel your heartbeat, usually a background rhythm, now as loud as drums in a distant war. Experts still argue whether sleep deprivation alone can induce auditory hallucinations of this intensity, but it doesn't matter. The hum is real, the figures outside are real, and your senses scream that nothing in your room is safe. By mid-morning, your parents are visibly unraveling. Your mother leans against the counter, head bobbing, muttering to herself, occasionally snatching fiber bars and boosters as if to ration them. Your father patrols the windows like a man possessed, watching, listening, counting, the stoic armor of his usual self shattered. Even small sounds, your footsteps on the carpet, the buzz of the ceiling fan, echo through the house like alarms. You can almost feel the chemical tension in the walls, as though the house itself is straining against the strain you all endure. You glance at the hallway mirror and flinch. The reflection seems off, lagging a fraction of a second behind your movements. For a moment, you swear it smiles when you don't, tilts its head unnaturally. Some online sleep deprivation stories claim mirrors are portals for perception shifts, but you shove the thought down. You can't afford delusions right now. Still, a knot of dread tightens in your stomach, and the world beyond your window feels like a powder keg, ready to ignite at the smallest tremor. Outside, shadows curl against the early morning sunlight, stretching taller, longer than logic allows. You sit back with your controller and try to focus on the game. You need a tether to normalcy, even if it's a flimsy one. The high-pitched whine from the street fades into a rhythm that matches your heartbeat, and for a few minutes, you pretend the world is just the living room, just you and your console, just the hum of electronics. But deep down, you know it's temporary. The world is unraveling beyond your walls, and your first true taste of the sleepless mandate has begun. 3 days of vigilance, fear, and a growing certainty that what lies outside may never have been entirely human. The day stretches like taffy. Light filters through the curtained windows in muted shades of gray, but it doesn't bring comfort. It only reminds you that the world outside is still awake, still moving, still wrong. You've begun to notice tiny inconsistencies in the walls of your room. The way a shadow stretches toward a corner that shouldn't exist, the subtle thrum in the floorboards that almost feels alive. Experts still argue whether sensory overload during prolonged sleeplessness creates entirely self-generated phenomena, but you can't risk discounting what your eyes see. Every detail might matter. Every twitch of a curtain might signal danger. You spend the early afternoon shuttling between game consoles, your father's anxious pacing in the hallway a constant backdrop. His usual calm has evaporated entirely, replaced by jittering movements, muttered calculations, and frequent glances at the locked doors and windows. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounds too deliberate, a bass line to a song you weren't meant to hear. Your mom is in the kitchen, hands shaking as she measures booster shots into tiny cups. Her voice rises and falls in odd cadences, sometimes instructive, sometimes whispering to herself in a tone that sends chills down your spine. She's become a human clock, measuring time in doses, in minutes between pills, in blinking. Her body reminds you that chemicals are a temporary anchor, but the mind is far less controllable. The street outside grows louder, and by late afternoon, you catch movement from your window again. Mr. Crawford has returned, staggering in slow circles as if caught in a ritual only he can understand. His neighbor, Mrs. Layton, crawls along the road, dragging herself in the wake of something unseen. Urban legends in your city have long told of sleep monsters, figures that appear when people are kept awake too long, but you've never believed them. Yet here, sprawled across cracked asphalt, your neighbors resemble nothing human anymore. Their eyes flicker blue and black, mouths twitching, and every groan seems synchronized, as though pulled by a hidden conductor. You shrink back from the window, clenching your booster shot bag, and the hairs on your arms rise. It's then that you notice the first real anomaly, a shadow moving counter to light. The reflection of a man, tall, impossibly thin, pacing outside but not casting a proper silhouette. You blink, and it's closer, the angle's wrong, joints bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. A thought flits across your mind. Maybe this is what the chemical was meant to protect against. Experts still argue whether sleep deprivation alone can make you see impossible geometries, but you feel it with every nerve ending. This isn't imagination. It's a warning. Your father approaches suddenly, voice tight. Stay away from the windows. Keep the lights low. Do not answer the door. His hand shakes as he hands you another fiber bar. The taste is bitter, sticky, and almost metallic. You chew it quickly. It burns your tongue but steadies your limbs like a tether against the tide. You swallow another, feeling the tiny pulses in your veins. Time bends again, seconds stretching into minutes, minutes folding into hours. Outside, the screaming begins. Not one person, but a chorus of overlapping screams, laughter, and static. By evening, the house is filled with sounds you can no longer fully identify. A window rattles in the hallway, though the latch hasn't moved. The faucet in the kitchen hisses as if boiling, yet the water remains cold. Your mom wanders in, voice cracking, counting dozes under her breath, eyes darting to corners you thought were empty. "It's coming," she whispers, almost to herself. "It's all around." You clutch your booster bag tighter, remembering the instructions, the exact hours, the limits, the warning that sleep could kill. And yet, every second awake seems to stretch the nightmare further, exposing new horrors. The street erupts again. Fire blooms from a nearby building, tongues of flame licking the sky. Shadows converge, moving toward the chaos with unnatural speed. Your neighbors, already transformed, push further into strange postures, hands reaching from their mouths, black and blue extensions curling through the air. It's almost beautiful in its geometry, a grotesque symmetry that terrifies you more than screams ever could. Internet forums had warned about contagion hallucinations during sleep deprivation experiments, swarms of people moving as one, but nothing you've read prepared you for the sensory assault. The smell of smoke, the hum of electricity in the street, the color of blood turned to ink in daylight. You attempt distraction. You flick on a DVD, anything to anchor yourself in familiar stories. Your favorite old sci-fi flick begins, the holographic battles and blinking control panels a fragile lifeline. But soon, even the characters seem wrong. Their lips sync imperfectly, shadows fall opposite logic, and the soundtrack warps as if influenced by the world outside your curtains. You realize the chemical isn't just keeping you awake. It's making the edges of reality flexible, turning normality into a fragile membrane. Night comes and brings no relief. The hum of electronics, the whispers from hallways, the stuttering pulse of lights all combine into a single sensory hammer. Your hands shake from the constant stimulant intake, your mind stretching thin like rubber over a skeletal frame. You see shapes move just beyond your peripheral vision, figures you can't rationalize, impossible in posture and proportion. Experts still argue whether prolonged sleep deprivation combined with chemical stimulants can create extended psychotic episodes, and you've begun to wonder if you'll ever get to the other side. At some point, you realize you must move. Staying in one spot is no longer safe. You gather a small pack, fiber bars, booster shots, water from the kitchen reserve, and creep toward the stairs. Every creak of the floor makes your pulse spike, and every shadow in the hallway seems to breathe, flex, and reach. The living room is a ruin. Chairs overturned, picture frames shattered, and a lingering, acrid smell like burnt metal. You take a breath, focusing on one foot in front of the other, your eyes darting for threats and anomalies alike. Outdoors, the world is entirely transformed. Fires smolder in multiple blocks. Cars are abandoned, some overturned. People, what used to be people, stagger in synchronized chaos, black and blue limbs twitching like marionettes. You pass one man face down on the asphalt, his mouth stretching impossibly as he murmurs phrases you cannot recognize. A distant crowd gathers around another burning building, arms waving from their mouths in a grotesque ballet. And the whisper reaches you again, soft but insistent. Come closer. Join the rhythm. You force yourself to look away, reminding yourself of the chemical, the fiber bars, the rules. Stay awake, survive, repeat. But survival has never felt so fragile. Every step, every breath, every blink feels like a negotiation with the thin membrane separating sanity from the chaos outside. Your pulse is a metronome for fear, and the horizon, lit by unnatural fires and dark shapes, promises that nothing, is going to be the same once you cross it. Dusk folds into night like a bruise spreading across the sky. You're moving through streets that used to feel familiar, yet now every lamppost is an enemy, every rustle a threat. Your limbs are heavy, your stomach hollow, but the fiber bars and booster shots keep your brain tense and alert, a taut string over a canyon of hallucination and exhaustion. Experts still argue whether prolonged stimulant use during sleeplessness permanently rewires neural pathways, but you don't have time for theory. Survival demands you keep moving. You find yourself in the town square, where the main fountain has cracked and twisted in the heat of an unexplainable blaze. The water is gone, replaced by thick black residue that smells of charred metal and rot. Faces press against the shattered windows of abandoned shops, some human, some impossibly distorted, watching you pass. You catch fragments of sounds, voices that should not coexist, laughter and crying layered over the static buzz of electricity. Urban legend whispers haunt your memory. The old story about the Blue Hour Watchers, townsfolk who became conduits for restless spirits during chemical tests. You scoff, but your stomach twists. The legend feels alive tonight. You clutch the booster shot bag tighter as you approach the fountain. Among the shadows, a small figure moves deliberately toward you. A child? You can't tell. Its body is emaciated, skin pale and mottled, and black and blue streaks crawl from its mouth like living ink. Yet the child doesn't make a sound, only tilts its head and watches. Your pulse quickens. You know you can't stop, can't acknowledge it. You continue past, pretending your eyes are glued to the cracked pavement, but its gaze clings to you, defying distance, defying reason. Further down the street, more of the sleep-affected gather. Their movements are eerily synchronized, almost ritualistic. One man lifts both arms, but instead of hands, inky tendrils writhe out from his sleeves, crawling like living shadows. You blink, and the tendrils vanish, or are absorbed into the black of night. Experts still argue whether these are hallucinations or reality bending under chemical stress, and you don't dare pause to find out. Every hesitation is a risk. You find a police car overturned, its lights flickering intermittently. Inside, a uniformed officer hangs limply, one arm crawling with the same black and blue manifestation. A city rumor from years ago resurfaces in your mind, a story about sleep siphons, devices that allegedly harvested consciousness from the sleepless. It had always seemed like nothing more than a cautionary tale to scare kids, yet the scene before you echoes that legend with terrifying precision. You force yourself past, ears ringing with the combined symphony of screams, laughter, and static hums. A sudden sound, a popping, then a hiss, catches your attention. A nearby alley shimmers, distorted as if reality itself is wobbly. Shadows stretch, twist, and fold into themselves, creating shapes that defy geometry. You realize this is what the chemical exposure was hiding from, a tear in perception, where the world outside the ordinary has become fluid. Your legs move on their own accord, drawing you toward the alley, but your mind screams in protest. You resist, pressing back into the street, clutching the booster shots like a talisman. And then you see it, the burning building from earlier. The crowd of sleep-affected surrounds it, black and blue arms waving from mouths in a hypnotic cadence, faces stretching impossibly, voices layering into one discordant chant. You catch sight of a familiar shape, a man with a wrench, twisted and unrecognizable, yet somehow alive. He locks eyes with you. You freeze. The whisper reaches you again, stronger. Come closer. You belong here. You run, not because you're fast, your legs are shaking, but because the only alternative is surrender. Your vision doubles, triples, until the buildings and shadows merge into a living mural of nightmare. You take a detour through a narrow street, past overturned vehicles, broken streetlights, and more victims of the sleep contagion. Each step feels like crossing a threshold between reality and dream. Every sound, a car horn, a distant scream, the hum of the broken streetlights, is amplified, each one a warning. You reach a small alley, walls scorched, trash strewn about, and pause to catch your breath. There's a smell of chemical fire, metal, and something organic that shouldn't exist. Your booster shots are dwindling, and your hands shake as you count them, willing your eyes to stay open. You press your face into the shadows, listening. The chanting crowd is still out there, their rhythm a hypnotic pull you cannot resist. A window above flickers, and you catch the silhouette of someone. Your mind tricks you into thinking it's your mother, reaching for you. The chemical keeps you awake, but it cannot shield you from the desire to collapse into sleep, into oblivion, into surrender. A vehicle engine roars. Headlights swing down the alley, blinding you. A man jumps out, tall, broad-shouldered, moving faster than should be humanly possible. He gestures for you to follow. You hesitate. Another trap? Another hallucination? But instinct, trained by fear and hours of stimulant-fueled vigilance, tells you to move. You sprint, dodging debris and the inky tendrils crawling from shadows. The man leads you past a burnt car, past bodies twitching unnaturally in the street, and toward a riverbank. The smell of wet earth and water is intoxicating, grounding. You glimpse the discolored sunflowers at the river's edge, unnatural in hue, swaying as if waving to you. He hands you a small vial. "Take this," he says. No instructions, no patience for hesitation. You drink it. Warmth spreads through your veins almost instantly, dulling the edge of panic, stabilizing your heartbeat, and lifting the worst of the hallucinations. The world remains distorted, fires still burn, but you feel clearer. Maybe safety is a step away. Maybe there's an end to this sleepless nightmare. The warmth from the vial spreads like a current through your body, a fleeting shield against the unending chaos. You stumble forward along the riverbank, the water reflecting the sickly orange glow of the fires in town, flickering like a heartbeat. Experts still argue whether exposure to these chemicals can permanently distort visual perception, but tonight, you don't care. You just want to survive. The crowd of sleep-affected seems distant now, voices muted to a low hum, almost like the world itself is taking a breath. Yet the city is far from safe. The streets ahead are littered with abandoned vehicles, half-broken barricades, and shadows that don't quite belong to anyone. You follow the man who gave you the vial, his movements precise and deliberate. Every so often, he glances over his shoulder, scanning for the inky tendrils and twisted figures that lurk in alleyways. Urban legends you once scoffed at now seem tangible. The stories of sleep predators that haunt lonely streets, seeking those who falter in their wake. You catch glimpses of shapes moving in the darkness. A woman crawling unnaturally across a burned car, a man dragging an arm that seems detached from his own body. You force your eyes away, gripping the booster shots like lifelines. Weaving through side streets, you approach a small warehouse, half-collapsed and covered in soot. The man signals you to stay low and follow him inside. Once inside, the air smells of chemicals, old wood, and smoke. It's quiet, almost too quiet. You notice a bank of old monitors, some flickering, displaying distorted images of streets you recognize. Your own house flickers across one screen, black and blue tendrils crawling along the walls, shadows writhing in time with the fires outside. Experts still argue whether these images are live or hallucinations transmitted by the chemical, but you can't tear your gaze away. The man leads you to a small room at the back. Inside, a few people sit huddled together, awake but exhausted, eyes wild with sleeplessness. One older woman whispers, "It's worse than the warnings said. I thought I'd be safe." Her words echo in your mind. You realize these are survivors, like you, immune, if only barely, to the full effect. Some of them are still twitching, hands moving involuntarily as if puppet by the chemical's residue. One man hums a melody, repeating a sequence of numbers like a mantra, trying to anchor himself. You collapse onto a dusty cot, relief and fear intermingling. The man hands you another vial. "This will stabilize you for a while," he says, his voice calm but urgent. "You're going to need to stay awake until morning, but the worst of the chemicals should fade with daylight." You nod, your mind barely processing. focusing instead on the physical relief spreading through your limbs. Outside, the city groans, a mixture of wind, fire, and the haunting calls of the affected. A low rumble shakes the warehouse, and you instinctively glance at the monitors. The fires have grown, consuming more buildings, while the sleep-affected move in disturbing waves, stretching and crawling, black and blue limbs thrashing toward the flames. You notice something horrifying yet fascinating. The fire doesn't seem to harm them. Legends of resistant spirits echo through your memory, but this is science, warped and broken by chemical madness. You press your hands over your ears, willing your heart to slow, trying to maintain the fragile thread of sanity. Hours crawl forward, and the man brings food, dry rations, and more fiber bars. You eat, your hands shaking, watching shadows move across the cracked windows. He explains that local authorities and the emergency response teams have collapsed under the chemical's influence. Most of the city is now ungovernable, streets ruled by sleepless, mutated humans. It's a controlled chaos, he says. But you made it here. You're safe for now. Safety doesn't mean normal. It means awake. His words stick to your mind like glue. You finally understand the scale. The phenomenon wasn't contained. It spread, infecting anyone exposed to the chemicals at the wrong moment. Eventually, the first gray hints of dawn stretch across the horizon. The chemical's grip weakens with sunlight, shadows retreat, and the inky limbs vanish. Fires still burn, buildings crumble, but the threat recedes enough for rational thought to return. You step outside the warehouse cautiously. The streets are desolate, smoldering, yet the air feels different, lighter somehow. Urban legends tell of survivors wandering through apocalypse-like nights, bearing witness to the inexplicable. You realize you are one of them. You walk back toward what remains of your home, each step a mixture of triumph and terror. The neighborhood is scorched, lifeless figures frozen in time. Your parents are nowhere in sight. Panic flares, but then you hear movement near the riverbank. Your mother, pale and fragile, leaning against a fallen tree, eyes wide but focused. Your father stands beside her, exhausted, hands shaking, still clutching the booster vial bag. They are alive. Somehow you all survived. The three of you walk slowly through the wreckage, silent for a long while, processing the horrors and the narrow margin of survival. The city is changed forever, black and blue shadows lingering in corners, reminders of the night when sleep became deadly. Experts still argue whether total sleeplessness during chemical exposure can permanently warp human consciousness, and you don't want to know the answer. You're awake, alive, and that is enough for now. As you reach the relative safety of a distant hill, you pause to look back. Smoke rises from the horizon, twisted shapes crawling along the streets, and the distant echo of laughter and whispers drifts to you, as if the city itself is still awake, still calling. You clutch your parents' hands tightly, feeling the pulse of survival, the fragile promise of another day. But deep inside, a part of you knows the memory of this sleepless night will never truly fade. Now the sky softens, a pale wash of morning creeping over the devastation. Your heartbeat slows as the sun touches scorched rooftops, and the shadows that once reached for you shrink into cracks in the asphalt. The chemical's influence wanes with daylight, leaving only the memory of hours stretched thin, nights without rest, and the surreal images that danced at the edges of perception. You can finally exhale, though the weight of what you've seen remains, a subtle tremor under your ribs. You glance at your parents, fragile yet alive, their hands trembling but steady enough to hold yours. Survival feels sacred and fragile at the same time. Some things you witnessed will linger in your mind like ghostly echoes, the blue-black hands, the twisted bodies, the voices that begged you to surrender. But daylight brings clarity, and with it, the faint hope of normalcy. Experts will debate whether prolonged sleeplessness reshapes the mind or simply unearths hidden fears. You do not need their answers tonight. As you walk together towards safety, the city hums a quiet, unsettling refrain. Life persists, distorted